Good evening from Johannesburg. My name is Terence McNamee. I'm the Deputy Director of the Brenthurst Foundation in South Africa. On behalf of the Foundation and President Obasanjo, our Chairman, let me first thank our much valued partners, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, not just for organizing the launch of our joint report this evening, but also for demonstrating such important thought leadership on African issues from the Australian perspective, and for continually highlighting the importance of African issues, not just to global commerce, security, and politics, but also increasingly to Australia's own global interests in areas as diverse as mining and education, as well as our growing mutual concerns over countering violent extremism and halting radicalization within our respective youth populations. The Aus-Africa dialogue is still young. It was an idea that was given tangible expression only a few years ago, though I'm sure that it is something old Africa hands in the Australian Diplomatic Corps have probably been thinking about for some time. Africa and Australia share some historical experiences, but in the main, we are two continents that are still discovering one another, two continents that are at different stages of economic development, but also in our respective engagements with the global economy, in our engagements with the institutions that manage global security and finance. It also goes without saying that one can generalize only so far when we are discussing a continent of one country on the one hand and a continent of 54 countries on the other, each with their own national priorities, their own national interests. But I think in one important respect, we can generalize, and that is from a nation-building perspective, African countries are still in their infancy when you think about how recently most achieved their independence. And that's important because part of what we see today in terms of levels of political volatility across the continent, in terms of our challenges and struggles around building social cohesion, around consolidating the continent's democratic advances in the past 2 decades. From a global historical perspective, this is not out of the ordinary. Societies everywhere, including Australia, have taken many, many decades, even centuries, often with many setbacks along the way, to overcome their gravest internal challenges and build states that can truly call themselves nations. Now, none of this is to underplay the serious shortcomings of some African governments which have failed to invest in their own institutions, failed to invest in their own people, and build the kind of equitable development, not just for the elite, but for all of their people. At the same time, the 21st century could really be Africa's century. Now, I know that's a cliche to say so, but if you think about the sheer numbers, if you think about how rapidly Africa is growing in terms of its youth population, in terms of urbanization, if you think about how resource rich the continent is, and if you think about how deeply new technologies are being woven into the fabric of ordinary African lives, within those mega trends lies tremendous potential to catalyze the kind of development that Africa has so desperately needed. Now, to realize that potential, it's first and foremost up to Africans themselves. But there also is a key role for strategic partners. And one of my main takeaways from the first 2 Aus-Africa dialogues, the first in Bunker Bay in Western Australia, and the second last year on the banks of the Zambezi, is that there is a tremendous appetite on the African side to share experiences and learnings with Australia. Of course, Africa is not set to abandon key partners in Europe or the United States or China. in the same way that Australia isn't either. But what I sense in terms of both continents is a tremendous desire to deepen linkages across the Indian Ocean, to strengthen these nascent partnerships. And from the African perspective, there is much to gain because Australia provides not only more realistic analogs for Africa, but also in terms of concrete partnerships on a more equal basis than Africa has experienced in the past. Thank you.